Hey, I'm Ryan Reynolds. At Mint Mobile, we like to do the opposite of what Big Wireless does. They charge you a lot, we charge you a little. So naturally, when they announced they'd be raising their prices due to inflation, we decided to deflate our prices due to not hating you. That's right. We're cutting the price of Mint Unlimited from $30 a month to just $15 a month. Give it a try at mintmobile.com/switch.
$45 up front for 3 months plus taxes and fees. Promo rate for new customers for limited time. Unlimited more than 40 gigabytes per month. Slows full terms at mintmobile.com.
Morning, Al.
Morning, mate.
And welcome all to Alan Hudson's American Dream. It's part 3 now, Al. We've done a couple of parts. We've had a look at the introduction to America. We've talked about one of the players that you played against in part 1, Vladislav Bogusevic. And now we're going to be talking about America and Anthony. They've got 4 games coming up, 2 against Morocco and Uruguay, which are friendlies, then Nation League games against Grenada and El Salvador. So I think we'll start on that because the first game's in Cincinnati, and as we spoke about in the last podcast, Anthony kicked his first ball with Don Shanks in the football academy, and Don's going out to Cincinnati to link up with Anthony all those years on, isn't he?
Well, it's amazing, really, when you think if you go, a lot of footballers or people who get on in life go back to where they begin, how it all started off, and this is quite surreal, isn't it? Really,
It is.
And it's great because it's just dropped in the lap of Don as well, because Don was he's over in Tampa Bay, which is a place close to his heart, because there's dog tracks and horse racing over there, and he's up the road playing in Cincinnati, so he jumps on he's got friends everywhere, every city in the USA, I think Don's got a friend, and he's got friends near Cincinnati, so he's going over to see his friends and obviously catch up with Anthony and go to the game. And I think he went to a game when Anthony I'm not sure he was coaching, but he went to a game in Orlando to see him once when he was in Tampa again, and he was absolutely chuffed, because it was. I suppose it takes Don back as well, Although Anthony, his first time he ever kicked a football when he was in Tampa Bay, and it was quite embarrassing. Well, not embarrassing, it was more funny than embarrassing. But when you look at, when they talk about people like Jose Mourinho, he was never a footballer, and you look at people like Arsene Wenger, he was never a footballer, and then they turn out to be these coaches and, top coaches and professors of football, and it makes you wonder about the backgrounds of these, people that get top jobs,
But the background of Anthony is he has a good pedigree because his older brother, Alan, was a terrific footballer. His dad, Alan Hudson, was one of the greatest football players that we've ever had. So football is in Anthony's DNA. And had you not have gone to America and possibly Dono arrived at Arsenal earlier and been there when you arrived, you may have stayed at Arsenal, and your life and Anthony's life may have been very different. And we did touch upon that in part 2. So Anthony might have had an even better grooming in football had you have stayed in in England. But in America, it was different because they play all American sports, didn't they?
Well, yeah. But I think going back to your first point is, when it comes to families, and like we watched, we don't have money yesterday. We watched, we're talking about Brian Clough and Nigel. The way Nigel's team were just so disorganised yesterday, and his dad wouldn't have stood for it. The sending off and all this. And in our family, as you said, Alan played it. He was a bit unfortunate, really, that he played under the wrong people. You got to have that element of luck. my mother's brother was a very good footballer. On the other side, I'm kind of that side of the family. I think I'm more of a Mason than a Hudson, and I'm on George's side. He was a good footballer. My father was a good footballer. He played at Wimbledon when Wimbledon were a football team before Vinnie Jones and all them got there. So yeah, it came a good stock really, but he was the most apart from my uncle George really, who wouldn't have got anywhere in management or coaching, wouldn't have interested him. He's too laid back and too shy. He was probably Anthony's most untalented of the lot, you might say, or the most unlikely to get on in a game. Yeah, and as I said to you last time we spoke, he's living my dream really, because that would have been after falling in love with the USA while we were out there when we first moved there, and it was such a dream to get away from England after all the aggravation at Arsenal, and then walk in there and start again, and not having to worry about all eyes on you. It was a dream, and and the dream become kind of reality, and that would have been the dream job for me, but he hasn't got the American job, and I don't know if he'll ever get it, but he's not in a bad position.
But again, you done a podcast with Anthony, because Anthony was doing these mastermind podcasts, and you said on the podcast, Anthony, you've either got to be a manager or a coach. You can't do both, and it looks as though the path that Anthony's taking is that of a coach and not a manager. Whether, as you say, one day that coach does become a manager, but sometimes it doesn't work, and you've got to work at what you're best at. A great example of that is Don Howe, fantastic coach. There's a great book out at the moment, written by David Tossell. And I think that you contributed to that book, Alan.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
Don Howe, your favourite coach, the only coach you liked, but when he went in to manage and be the number one, didn't quite work for Don, did it? It was always better as a number two.
Well, I think it's my theory, but I think it's common sense.
Yeah.
It's you don't have to be a genius to work out that you can't do both. It's Waddington was probably the greatest example. You never see him all week. You never see him on the training ground. All the business of playing and the business of your outside life, you go through him. Yeah. Whereas your day-to-day fitness, you could fall out with your coaches all day long on the training field. You could ignore them all day long. You could do what they tell you to do and not do what they tell you to do. It didn't matter because they were really unimportant coaches, where on the management side of it, it was all about it was all about pleasing yourself, because if you please yourself, then you're pleased because you're happy with your own performances, and the manager's got to be happy. But I don't know what Anthony is at the moment. I don't think he's definitely not a manager. I was over in Colorado when he gave a team talk once, and he spoke to the players, and had I been a player in that dressing room, I might have pulled him up on a couple of things, the thing with doing both, and like with Don was when Don spoke as a coach, Don Howe at Arsenal. I mean, he turned things around where the manager balls it all up. He turned it all around and turned a team that we really were about fifth from bottom. And we, with the players we had, it was too ridiculous for words, One of the best players in the world, maybe at that time, Brady, and we're fifth from bottom. And I weren't playing that well. Malcolm McDonald, Frank Stapleton went on to, do great things at Manchester United. Geordie Armstrong was still a terrific player. we had, so Pat Jennings weren't really finished at that time, but he was the best goalie in the world at one time, and there we were, fifth from bottom. So it shows you that the manager was making a pig's ear of it all. And then along came Don and kind of steadied the ship on the training ground and got things back to normality. And the old saying again, simplicity is genius. Don brought simplicity back into the club, and and I don't know. He probably I don't know what Don's idea of it was, but when Terry called him to bring him back, he must have thought, "Oh, this is a fantastic opportunity for me to turn things round." And because he knew that there's something wrong with Terry Neal, But they're two completely different jobs. And when when I returned home from Seattle and went back to Stoke, and I was finished and on my last legs, and the first game was against Arsenal, and he was manager, and I didn't really take much notice of that, to tell the truth. And all I remember is seeing a quote from him after the game saying that Hudson was outstanding, but we'll see how long it lasts, kind of thing. It was a kind of a knock at me, but it was kind of a cover up on his own management skills. Well, it proved that he couldn't manage.
And again, different dynamics brought in to organise, like young Clough. The organisation wasn't there. You do need that combination, the experience, the young, the organised, the allowing to express yourself. And in Tony Waddington, he encapsulated everything, and arguably one of the most, I suppose, undervalued managers in British football. Managed Stoke for 17 seasons. Almost, we got that great book out the year we nearly won the league. Stoke City were vying and played in Europe. You played in Europe for Stoke. So, when you look at it, it is all about, all our podcasts, all about good management. Now, going back to Thursday night, Morocco, difficult game for America, and then on paper, on the 5th, an even more difficult game, that's next Sunday, against Uruguay. So America are looking at having two difficult testing friendlies before they go into these nation leagues, because we then play America in the World Cup in November.
Well, I think you only got to look at the results, and you only got to look at, not world football, but even the Euros and all the accolades that Southgate got when we messed up in the Euros, and everyone was going overboard about the match against Italy on my home ground when. We should have whipped them, with a good manager, with a top manager. They were there for the taking, and we didn't do it. So, it kind of shows how it's levelled out over the years. There ain't no whipping dogs anymore. And I'm here with Alan at the moment, and we're saying that the game on Wednesday night, Scotland against Ukraine, and Scotland are odds-on favourites to beat them, but especially with the war going on, how close a game is that going to be? There's just no certainties, and the USA, strangely enough, I think they were probably a better playing team 10 years ago.
Yeah. Than
what they are now. They got a strange kind of setup. They got a strange. I watch Pulisic, and I think if he's one of their main players, and they can't be as good as what they were, because he's got so much ability, but I wouldn't trust. Couldn't put my trust in him. And if he's one of their main players, then. But having said that, you look at the opposition. As you mentioned, Don's going there, and he's going there to see Anthony, but. He's going there to check up on the Moroccan that plays for Queen's Park Rangers, young Chair.
Good player.
And he is a good player. I like him. I think I'm very surprised that someone like Guardiola, Klopp, or one of the top clubs haven't picked this kid up. I would, because all right, it's maybe a little bit like when I went to Stoke and nobody wanted me and everyone said Waddington's took a gamble. All right, when you sign players, everything's a bit of a gamble, change your lifestyle and this and that. But this kid can play.
Yeah.
With good, you'll be surprised. You put a good. He's in a poor team at Queens Park Rangers. They're just not on the same wavelength as him.
Yeah.
And he goes to pass the ball to certain players, and they don't understand what he's trying to do, and then he has one touch too many, and then he has another touch too many, and then he looks he looks the guilty party when he's not. They're not on the same wavelength as him, but that couldn't happen in a top team. If he played in a good team with really good players, I mean, we watched. All right, Liverpool got beat last night, but Mane was exceptional again. If he played with people like that, because they make runs where you have to give him the ball because they make it simple for the midfield player or the creator. And I think young Chair, Don and I spoke about it many times. He liked him as a kid. He kind of was touting him. And he thinks he's going to be, and I agree with Don. I think he could be a top player. So it would be interesting to see how he plays against the States on Wednesday.
Absolutely, I've watched him a number of times, Share, and he's always been a player that caught my eye, and totally agree. And I think the difference in our football over here in England at the moment, and it has been for several years, if he was a midfield player and he was 6'2" and he could run around and win tackles and smash into players, he would be signed by a top team. There's a reticence to sign smaller players that have got bags of ability, and for whatever reason it is, apart from Guardiola, because Guardiola's different, but he has got an array of riches. But there is something about our football that they don't like to take that punt on that skillful, smaller player that can just pull the rabbit out the hat. Buendia is a great example of Villa.
Well, absolutely, but Guardiola's he was brought up with three midgets, wasn't he?
Yeah, absolutely.
At Barcelona, he had the three lads at Barcelona who, they couldn't find boots small enough for them, really, could they? They were terrific, three terrific players. So he was educated by them, really.
Yeah.
And that's what's needed. But as you say, most of these, it's basically like going back to school, when they pick the bigger boys instead of the more skillful ones. They like the big and strong ones. But it's a myth, It was like I think we've had the conversation. I had one last week, strangely enough, that you watch England schoolboys years ago, and all the big strong boys, and none of them ever made it. And then later on, all the talented boys that were overlooked came through, And this is the same thing. But going back to him, strangely enough, Chair, if you look at the history of Queens Park Rangers, I mean, they've had so much talent go through their club, but they just haven't had a manager who can recognise it and actually build around that talent rather than just throw that talent in there. They should build teams around people like that and get them to play through him. I think this manager has tried to do that in certain aspects. He's put his faith in him and he's tried, but you can't see bad players. You can't make bad players good players and tell them when to give him the ball. Yeah. They just don't know when. They're just a poor team, Queens Park Rangers. And when you've got a terrific talent playing in a poor team, it's very, very difficult. And again, it's management skills. You've got to get rid of the others and build around this fella. It's as you say, Guardiola knows how to do it, but Guardiola's been very fortunate. Again, we can go back to You know, what would he be like? What would he be like if he'd have managed Mansfield yesterday? You know, or give him a poor club with poor players. But every job he's walked into, he's had world class players, hasn't he?
Yeah, I guess the old saying is that you can't make a silk purse out of a sow's ear. But just staying on the QPR thread for a while before we go back in time and talk about your first game when you played against your to-be next manager against Tulsa for Seattle with Alan Hinton managing Tulsa. Stan Bowls, they've erected the name the Stan Bowles stand, haven't they, at the Esley Road end at Queen's Park Rangers, which is a fitting tribute to Queen's Park Rangers' greatest ever talent.
Yeah. It's very sad actually. It's and it's a sad indictment on the club as well.
Absolutely, 100%.
These football clubs are built. You know, when you see what happened to Bobby Moore, he's the greatest example of all time. Being treated like he was treated after England won the World Cup, and then what he did in Mexico in 1970, and the way he was outcasted, and you know, by both club and country. At West Ham, the treatment was appalling. You know, his name was God in the game, and that's who he was, and he was treated badly. And when you see a statue of him outside the ground and at Wembley, you think, well, that's no good, is it? They should have looked after the man when he was alive. Statues are no good once you're gone. It was probably a little bit like having a statue of Michael Jackson outside Fulham, when Johnny Haynes was their greatest player. What do statues mean,
Absolutely. I thought there was going to have a statue outside there at Burnley Football Club of Michael Jackson as well, but unfortunately it didn't quite happen. And they
Sean Dyche won't have one, I know that.
No, absolutely. But again, a fitting tribute to Stan, and what a shame that Stan isn't in a good position to go down to Tampa with Shanksy, because those boys, I mean, they were soulmates, wasn't they?
He wouldn't ever, Paul. Stan wouldn't have made the game to Cincinnati. He would have been in the dog track at St. Petersburg. He wouldn't have got him out. He was that was him. Stan was one of those. He was a total one-off. He wasn't really in love with football. It was kind of, the saying, it wasn't second nature to him. It weren't, he was a freak, really. He was just born with just a gift. It was incredible, and he just turned up on a Saturday for 90 minutes, and that was it. In fact, I don't think he was there after time. He was, the couple of stories that he was in the bookmakers at 20-3. Ran the corner from the Brentford ground and the QPR ground before 4 matches with his kit on and his overcoat on. It was true, he just wasn't interested in football. It was unbelievable. Yet you wouldn't know. You would think this geezer was lived and breathed football the way he played it, but he didn't.
Some people have got that natural ability, Al, of course, and some haven't. You were another player that had natural ability, one of the greatest players ever to wear the royal blue of Chelsea, and certainly one of the most skillful players to ever wear the royal blue of Chelsea. I didn't realise your mate Chris Garland was the first Chris to play for Chelsea.
We had a Christine Matthews at the club at the time.
She was a secretary though, wasn't she, Christine? She never actually kicked a ball. But no, that was in your fantastic book, The Working Man's Ballet. I was just flicking through it earlier today. But Tulsa, you've gone over there. It's not quite happened for you after the FA Cup final. There was a steward's inquiry called by Don. It kicked off when you told Terry exactly where it went wrong. You didn't like it. You got the pat on the back, etc., when you went out and done the training session. And then I think you played one more game, didn't you? A testimonial. You got done for drink and driving after that. And then you were on the plane over to the Great Northwest to ply your trade for Seattle Sounders. And that first game, you didn't realise it went into overtime, but you had to have an injection, didn't you? So talk me through that first game and your American dream, how it started.
Yeah, it was. Well, the whole thing really. I think I was there probably three months before the season started. I needed to get I was out running every day, but there's nothing like training properly or playing in matches and everything else. So I was in pretty, which I thought quite good condition. But when I went there, I didn't realise that although it was great to get back playing and living in a different environment, everything was great. And I was still having trouble with the ankle, and training on our training ground at Renton wasn't the greatest kind of surface. And I remember going to the Kingdome on the night of the match, and we played Tulsa Roughnecks, and Alan Hudson was their manager, who I played against a couple of years before when he was at Derby. And I just, my ankle was in a bit of a mess, and I spoke to Jimmy Gabriel about it, and I said, I think I'm going to need a painkiller. I didn't like taking injections and all that, but it was just playing me up. Mm. And Marty Kushner, our club doctor, who was a great fella, he put the dreaded cortisone in it. And unbeknown to me at that time, that in America, if it was being my first match, if you come off, it was a draw like over here at 90 minutes, then you go into overtime, and you go back on. And I know he's changed 2 or 3 times. With introduced into the World Cup, the golden goal and all that. But you go into overtime, and he only put enough cortisone in me to last me 90 minutes. And maybe if it's 15 minutes half time, so even if he put 2 hours in there, it wore off. Mm. And by the time we got into extra time, I think I don't know, I think they might have won by the odd goal or the whatever, but it was, I just remember not being able to walk off the field properly. Yeah. I was in such a mess. But that was a kind of reaction you get from all this cortisone, and it's amazing, really, that football clubs haven't had more lawsuits against them, really, because it's just no good. Strangely enough, I went to see my uncle the other day, and he's 85, and he's got a bad knee, and they're sticking cortisone in his leg, and I can't believe that they're still allowed to do this. But he don't have to run around for 90 minutes, does he?
No, but he probably would be able to now with that cortisone inside him.
Well, I wouldn't mind it in my drink, actually. But
vodka and orange and cortisone.
Yeah, cortisone. That just an added spice of cortisone in it. I mean, it was really that bad for you, and it was. But I didn't realize till that first night that was the effects, and I couldn't work out how I was all right for 90 minutes, although I didn't play that well. Because it was all brand new to me. I adjusting to the kind of AstroTurf that we had at the Kingdome, the kind of, again, playing with maybe I don't think I'm out of order in saying inferior players. Yeah. We had Mike England, who played at Tottenham, who was an outstanding player. And we had a kid called Steve Buttle, who was outstanding. He was a fantastic player, who played at Bournemouth and unheard of over here. And 2 or 3 maybe decent players, but the rest, not that good. Mm-hmm. So you're playing, I have hot water out here. Yeah. I think it's very difficult to, it's like stepping up. It's a lot easier, like when I played for England against West Germany, it's a lot easier to step up into that grade and to show your worth than it is to step down and play with lesser players and against lesser players. It's kind of, you're going into the unknown, if you know what I mean. It is very, very, very difficult when you're, 6 months before that I was playing with Liam Brady at Arsenal, and now I'm playing, in Seattle, and it was very difficult. And I think that was what I'm trying to say, and it came through when poor Jimmy Gabriel got the sack, Harry Redknapp got the sack, he was there at the time. Alan Hinton took over, and the next thing you know, the first thing Alan did was bring in 4 or 5 players, and the standard rose incredibly high, and within 6 months, 9 months, we broke all records over there. And it was only because of the management and the insight and foresight of Alan Hinton that did that.
But it was an ever-changing face, wasn't it, of Seattle? There was players.
To listen to the rest of this podcast, please go to www.patreon.com/SRBmedia, or just follow the links in the description. Thank you.
Hey, it's Paige DeSorbo from Giggly Squad. High quality fashion without the price tag. Say hello to Quince. I'm snagging high-end essentials like cozy cashmere sweaters, sleek leather jackets, fine jewelry, and so much more. With Quince being 50 to 80% less than similar brands. And they partner with factories that prioritize safe, ethical, and responsible manufacturing. I love that. Luxury quality within reach. Go to quince.com/style to get free shipping and 365-day returns on your next order. Quince.com/style.